Good morning and welcome to today's state and federal program directors meeting. This will be the last meeting for the 25-26 school year. It's hard to believe that we're wrapping up and winding down. I'm Adrienne Balcazar, and I would like to introduce the LCAP State and Federal Programs Unit. Joining us from the team is Helen Choi,
Good morning, everyone.
Laurel Estrada,
Good morning.
Augustine Garcia,
Good morning.
Rachel Garcia,
Hello, everyone.
Anita Lomeli,
Good morning.
and Christiana Park.
Good morning, everyone.
And joining us from our support staff is April Grease
Good morning.
and Susanna Mendoza.
Good morning.
We want to remind you that to access today's presentation, we ask you to click on the link in the chat. This will take you directly to the slides. You can also use the link on this slide when you get it, and this will take you to our Canvas page where the presentation can be accessed through the icon as shown here, as well as the agenda and any other resources. Today's topic on our agenda will be the consolidated application, specifically the spring release, the 26-27 state and federal accountability alignment, also the FPM updates. We will take a look at the upcoming 26-27 FPM reviews, and then a closer look at the comprehensive sexual health education program in relation to the FPM instrument. And then lastly, we will end with our LCAP update, submission and approval reminders. We ask you to place your questions in the chat box and we will answer any simple questions if we can. We will be following up with a written response in a Q&A format, and that will be emailed to you, and it also will be posted. We are recording today's training, and this will also be posted on our website. As I said earlier, this is our last meeting of the 25-26 school year, and we would like to congratulate anyone that will be retiring, perhaps being promoted, or will not be joining us next school year. So if you would like, kindly put it in the chat so we can congratulate all of you. And if even if you're a lotto winner, no amount is too small. So we want to make sure that we remember everybody and to thank everyone for all of your dedication and attention and hard work towards implementing compliant federal programs. Okay, so now let's take a look at the CONAP, the spring release, and it's also referred to as it is the consolidated application, also referred to as the CONAP. Before we get started, it's important to realize that the CONAP is one application that is submitted in two parts. These two parts are related to one another. In the past, they used to be called Part 1 and Part 2, and the Part 2 used to be submitted in November, but changes have taken place in the past years, and so now it's still in two parts, but it's a little less obvious because now they don't call it Part 1 and Part 2. It's called Spring Release and Winter Release. And the second collection is so far in the school year, it often gets confusing between the winter release and the spring release. So again, just kind of a grounding. If you look at the spring release, it's basically the application asking to participate for the next school year. And with that, there are legal assurances and certifications that have to be filled out. Also, you're fulfilling the expenditure reports for the past 2 years, and then any documentation of private school consultation and services. And this is the one part, part one, or the spring release is the one that requires the board approval. And so this one, you do need to have it board approved. The winter release, which is usually around February, this is where you will submit the final entitlements for the funded programs, also reporting of funds allocated for indirect and administrative costs and direct reservations, reporting of school level allocations, and expenditure reports for the current and prior year. And this is the time for the Title I carryover waiver and the Title I carryover report. So again, making sure that you see that both are, they have different components, but yet it's, like I said, one application, two parts. So if we take a look at right now, which is the spring release, the timeline here, you can see that in the consolidated application and reporting system, it opened on May 1st. So you basically have 2 months to submit and certify all the required forms between the time the system opens and when it closes, and which is on Monday, June 30th. So sticking to the dates within the yellow brackets will ensure that your LEA will be on track to receive your federal funding for next school year. Also, to keep in mind that this is the release is this is the one where you do need a board approval by your local governing board. Then, as you can see on the timeline, between July 1st and August 14th, any LEA that has not certified any of the required forms, or if more information is needed, you will be contacted by the corresponding program office at CDE. And it's important to respond immediately to CDE's request, because once the system closes on August 15th, it will not be open for any other reason. In the spring release of the CONAP, there are forms required for 3 fiscal years. So the 24-25, the 25-26, and then the forms for the 26-27. So on this slide, you can see the required reports for the fiscal year of the 24-25 fiscal year, as well as the 25-26. So you can see Title 1, 2, 3, and also 1, 2, 3, and homeless for the 25-26. The required assurances and certifications are listed here for the 26-27 school year. And it can get a little tricky to navigate the instructions for all these reports. So you really want to make sure that you're following all the guidance and the instructions. We want you to note, though, that the deadlines for these requirements, some have changed. So the close date, it used to be in March, is now the closing deadline is to apply for federal funds is December 15th. So this usually was like a later date because of charter schools. Sometimes when there was a new charter school and they wanted to apply for funds, it took a while for them to gather all the necessary enrollment numbers and seabeds and such. So there was always delayed until March, but now they've moved it up. So it's December 15th. And then if you look at the other dates for the consultation, it's March 15th of 27. And then the Title III, those are closing September 30th, 26. So again, making sure that for each component in the fiscal year of 26-27 that you note the date change as well as adhere to them. And we can't stress enough how important it is for LEAs to begin completing and certifying the required forms for the 3 fiscal years sooner rather than later. Because if you do have any questions, you still have time to contact CDE and get a response from them. So again, keeping all this at the forefront of your work to make sure that you have time in case there are questions that come up. Looking ahead at the 26-27 CONAP winter release, it's scheduled to open January 15th, 2027, and the initial deadline is February 15th, with the system closing March 15th, 2027. We also wanted to provide the direct link to CDE's main consolidated application webpage, where all of the instructions to each of the reports are housed and anything else you will need. And now I will turn it over to Helen, who will share some information about the 26-27 state and federal accountability.
Thank you, Adrienne. Today we'll provide a brief preview of what's ahead in the 26-27 state and federal accountability cycle, including upcoming changes related to SI identification, CSI, ATSI, and differentiated assistance. Our goal is to introduce these changes at a high level so LEAs can begin planning and preparing for the next identification cycle. So we'll share more detailed guidance next year following the release of the 2026 California School Dashboard in October, when updated data and implementation resources will be available. So remember that under ESSA, it states that is required to identify schools for federal support categories, including CSI, TSI, and ATSI. So in California, these determinations are made using results from the California School Dashboard. The dashboard is also used to determine when schools are eligible to exit support status. ESSA also requires schools identified for CSI, TSI, or ATSI to develop and implement school improvement plans focused on improving student outcomes and addressing areas of needs. So in addition, ESSA Section 1003 provides school improvement funding to LEAs that have CSI eligible schools. So these funds are intended to support implementation of evidence-based strategies and continuous improvement efforts. So schools may be identified for CSI low graduation if their graduation rate is below 68% averaged over 3 years, or for CSI low performing if they are amongst the lowest performing 5% of Title I schools. So beginning with the new identification cycle next year, schools that do not successfully exit ATSI within 4 years will also be identified for CSI under the new CSI not exiting ATSI category. So for both ATSI and TSI, the identifications are based on consistently low performing student groups. So SS statute references on the right here, it identifies the federal requirements tied to each support category. So let's take a look at the ESSA identification timeline from 2023 through 2028 and how schools move through CSI, ATSI, and TSI support over time. So in 2023, schools were identified for CSI based on low graduation rates or low performance, and some schools were also identified for ATSI. In 2024 and 2025, new schools could be identified for TSI during year 2 and year 3 of the cycle. And during that period, ATSI and CSI schools could exit status based on improved performance, but new ATSI or CSI identifications were not made. So in 2026, a new identification cycle begins. Schools may again be identified for CSI due to low graduation rates or low performance, or because they did not successfully exit ATSI status. So ATSI status, as ATSI identification also resumes during this new cycle. The cycle then continues through 2027 and 2028 with additional TSI identification and support. So it's also important to note that these federal identification timeline closely aligns with LCAP cycles, helping districts integrate improvement planning and monitoring and resource alignment into one continuous improvement process. So as previously stated, one important ESSA accountability shift beginning with the 2026 dashboard is the new CSI not exiting ATSI category. Schools that do not successfully exit ATSI within 4 years will move into CSI status under CSI not exiting ATSI. This is why ESSA assistance status spreadsheet is important. It shows how many years each school has been identified for ATSI. So as shown on this slide, schools currently with a 3-year or a 4-year ATSI flag may become eligible for CSI not exiting ATSI if they do not exit ATSI on the 2026 dashboard. So this change increases the importance of monitoring ATSI plans and ensuring schools are implementing effective improvement strategies. The next ESSA accountability shift impacts LEAs with schools that do not exit CSI within 4 years. So beginning with the 2026 dashboard, if a school does not successfully exit CSI within 4 years, the LEA becomes eligible for differentiated assistance or DA. So similar to the previous slide, the 2025-26 ESSA Assistance Status Spreadsheet can help you identify potential impacted areas. So it shows how many years a schools have been identified for CSI. So LEAs with schools currently in third or fourth year of CSI, the LEA may become eligible for differentiated assistance if those schools do not exit CSI on the 2026 dashboard. And again, this shift really reinforces the importance of closely monitoring CSI schools and strengthening improvement efforts. So here are some additional resources related to California Systems of Support and other ESSA accountability resources that may be helpful as you continue this work. So next year, during the 26-27 SFP Directors Meeting, we'll go more in depth on these changes and what they mean for LEAs and schools, especially following the release of the 2026 California Dashboard and additional state guidance. And thank you. And now I'll turn it over to Laurel.
Thank you, Helen. So today, as Adrienne mentioned, we're going to provide some FPM updates, including information about the 26-27 FPM reviews, and we'll take a look at the Comprehensive Sexual Health Education Program Instrument. Okay, so let's take a look at the FPM cycle. This is how the FPM cycle is organized by school year. So LEAs are grouped in cohorts A, B, C, and D. And for each LEA, the cycle goes back and forth online and on-site every 2 years. So for this 25-26 school year, cohort B was up for an online review, and cohort D was up for an on-site review. For 26-27, cohort A is up for an online review, and cohort C is up for an on-site review. Typically, each year, around 125 LEAs are selected statewide for FPM review using an established selection criteria. In the 25-26 school year, only 88 LEAs statewide were reviewed. This year, we're back up to 125, as you can see in this chart. As I mentioned, 26-27 FPM reviews include Cycle A for on-site, Cycle C for online. On CDE's compliance monitoring webpage, you'll find the posted list of districts and charter schools that have been selected for next year's FPM reviews statewide. So what does this mean for LA County? Earlier this month, these 13 districts and charter schools were notified of their selection for an FPM review in the 26-27 school year. In case you're not yet aware of this late-breaking news, take a look and see if your district or charter school was selected. So if we look at the timeline for next year's 26-27 FPM reviews, this month, CDE notified districts and charter schools that they will be reviewed. The district superintendents and charter schools were sent an email with this information. Additionally, in this information, the CDE asked the LEA to complete a web-based scheduling and information request. It asked who the designated FPM review coordinator is for the FPM. And you're also asked to include other information, such as your calendar for next year, so they can coordinate the dates of the reviews. The sooner all districts and charters submit the survey, the sooner CDE will be able to let selected LEAs know which dates, sites, and programs will be reviewed. In June, the schedule of dates, schools, and programs to be reviewed will be emailed to the LEA's FPM review coordinator. Also in June, you can expect the 26-27 FPM instruments to be posted on the CDE compliance monitoring webpage. Once the instruments are posted, you can begin informing and training staff responsible for the implementation of the programs and for the collection of evidence that you'll need to submit to CDE. CDE's virtual FPM training will be held the first week of August. You will want to invite all your district and site level staff to this virtual training. Based on the date of your FPM review, you'll want to backwards plan to ensure you meet the deadlines for submitting your evidence, which is 30 days prior to the date of your scheduled FPM review. For everyone else who's not selected for an FPM review, it's also important for you to know what evidence is required in the instruments. Best practice is to annually train your staff and school staff responsible for the implementation of state and federal programs and the collection of evidence so that you are able to maintain ongoing compliance. At our SFP directors meetings, we like to dig into particular program instruments a little more deeply to support districts in maintaining ongoing compliance. Today, we're going to take a closer look at the Comprehensive Sexual Health Education Program instrument. We covered this topic earlier in the year, but it's relatively new to the FPM reviews, and recently, CDE provided some tips that we'll go over today. The tips center mostly around the items listed here: parent and guardian notifications and communication, updating board policies and ARs, professional development, using compliant curricula, and finally, access and equity relative to comprehensive sexual health education. Before I begin, I want to remind you of information that we've provided previously. Since the 26-27 FPM program instruments have not yet been made available to us, on this slide, you'll find links to this year's FPM program instruments on the CDE Compliance Monitoring website, and also a link to CDE's 25-26 FPM box. In the box, you'll find folders for each program that was reviewed this year. The programs contain the program instruments along with other training materials. We encourage everyone to check out the box in order to access the FPM presentations and resource materials. We'll all be on the lookout for updated materials for the 26-27 school year. The first part of the program instrument involves communication with parents and guardians. To be compliant, the parent-guardian notification letter cannot have a signature line, because consent for this program is to be passive. In a related part of the program instrument, the letters need to be translated into home languages of middle and high school students using the 15% threshold for any one language. Reviewers will request a current copy of the LEA's language census, along with copies of the letter in languages other than English for this item. CDE provides a sample parent-guardian notification letter on their webpage, and we have included a link to it here on this slide. Typically, reviewers will request a copy of Board Policy and AR 6142.1, which are related to sexual health and HIV/AIDS prevention instruction. It's important to make certain your LEA has this policy and AR, that they're board adopted, and reflect the most recent state legislation related to comprehensive sexual health education. We provide here a link to Gamut where you can access sample board policies and ARs, but it's important to double check that those samples contain all that's required in the program instrument. In general, if your policy was last updated prior to 2016, when new laws were passed, it's likely to require some updating. Another important part of the Comprehensive Sexual Health Education Program instrument to take a look at concerns training for staff. Reviewers will ask for evidence related to training, including dates, participation, and training materials. They're looking for whether teachers are trained in the board-adopted curriculum. CDE recommends implementing a 3-year cycle for ensuring that teachers are trained in the currently adopted curriculum. There's a link on this slide to a training education program that can be used for this purpose. It contains both required and elective modules. When adopting curricula related to sexual health education, reviewers will look for whether programs for middle and high school students include LGBTQ+ content. They'll also look to see that the materials are modified to ensure access for special education students and English learner students. A resource is provided on this slide that offers a free lending library of training curricula that are compliant with both federal and state requirements. To continue with the topic of adopting curricula related to sexual health education, reviewers will look for whether programs address all the requirements in California education codes listed on this slide. They'll also check to see whether the curricula are board adopted. For the review, the entire curriculum must be uploaded into CMT, showing the copyright date and appendices as evidence. Once again, we provide a link to the webpage that offers a free lending library of training curricula that are compliant. So when you first look at the program instrument for comprehensive sexual health education, the list of evidence seems daunting, but several of the items are repetitive. While additional evidence might be available based on your local LEA context for implementation, the evidence included throughout the program instrument is compiled on this slide. CDE staff are always helpful when LEAs have questions about what evidence would show compliance, and our team here in the LACO LCAP-State and Federal Programs Unit can also assist with questions about evidence requests. Finally, we provide some tips for being compliance ready when it comes to administering this instrument. Make sure that your board policies and ARs are current. Professional development should cover both sexual health education and HIV prevention education. Be sure to document grade levels in which these are taught and by whom. You'll be asked to upload the entire curriculum, including the copyright dates and any visual media that accompanies it. Parent opt-out must be in writing and must contain specific content from which the student is opted out. We've provided just a few resources in this presentation, but many more are available to assist you in fulfilling these requirements. As with all things related to state and federal programs, don't hesitate to reach out to our team if we can provide additional information or support. And with that, I'll hand it over to Anita, who's going to provide some important LCAP updates.
Thank you, Laurel. Okay, it's that time of year when we are all getting ready to close out the current school year while getting ready for the new one. And of course, the LCAP is front and center in this process. In this section, we will go over when and how to submit your LCAP, as well as a few reminders related to its approval. But first, an important reminder. May has been a particularly busy month for us as we have been reading LCAPs in what we call the pre-review process. We want to thank all 65 school districts who have participated by submitting their 2026-27 LCAP draft to us, and we want to encourage the 14 districts who have not yet submitted a draft to please do so as soon as possible. The pre-review process has now entered its 5th year, and we have noticed that it greatly supports school districts from receiving a clarification letter during summer and the formal review process. As always, just like Laurel said, we are here to support you in making sure that the plan is adopted by your school board and submitted to the county office for formal review and is as approvable as possible. We are at 82.3% participation rate, and we are aiming for 100%. In keeping with that thought of support, your LCAP reviewer will be reaching out to you if they haven't already done so to prep for summertime and the formal LCAP approval process. It would be most helpful for us to know when you will be out of the office or on vacation or retired, and in case we need to reach you during that time, we would also appreciate an LCAP designee should we need to seek LCAP information during your absence. Now, as you are getting ready to wrap up the LCAP, we want to go over the components that make up the complete 2026-27 LCAP. A complete LCAP includes the budget overview for parents, the 2026-27 LCAP-State Board adopted template, the action tables, and the LCAP instructions. The components of the LCAP must be assembled in one document in the order shown on this slide. When you take your plan to your board for adoption, and when you post it on your LEA's website, it needs to be a single document in the order shown. So once the LCAP has been developed with all the required components, there are required steps that school districts must adhere to prior to adopting the LCAP. The steps on this slide also apply to charter schools using their LCAP as their SIPSA. The full 2026-27 draft LCAP must be presented to the Parent Advisory Committee and to the English Learner Parent Advisory Committee as applicable to your LEA for review and comment. Additionally, the superintendent of a school district must respond in writing to all comments received from the PAC and the EL-PAC. The LEA must also notify members of the public of the opportunity to submit written comments regarding the proposed expenditures and actions in the LCAP. So in order to do this, the public has to have the opportunity to view the entire LCAP draft, including expenditure tables and the BOP. Remember, the draft LCAP includes all of the components listed on the previous slide. So let's go over the steps leading up to board adoption and submission of the LCAP to the County Office of Education. First, the LEA's local governing board must hold a public hearing for both the LCAP and the budget. It's also important to note that the agenda for the public hearing must be posted at least 72 hours before the public hearing meeting. Then the governing board must adopt the LCAP and budget at a separate public meeting held after, but not on the same day as the public hearing on or before July 1st. Remember that the 25-26 local indicator results must be presented to the governing board or body at the same meeting in which the LCAP and budget are adopted. Charter schools may hold the public meeting for adoption on the same day as the public hearing. Now, school districts must then submit the board-adopted LCAP to the County Office of Education no later than 5 days after the adoption for formal review and approval. Charter schools must submit their adopted LCAP to the County Office of Education by July 1. As a reminder, all school districts and charter schools in LA County will submit their 2026-27 LCAP using LACO's ELCAP system. For school districts, it must be submitted within 5 days of adoption, and for charter schools, it must be submitted on or before July 1. If your LEA does not use LACO's ELCAP system to develop and write your LCAP, then you will need to upload a PDF of your complete LCAP, which includes the budget overview for parents, the 2026-27 LCAP, the action tables, and the LCAP instructions. The PDF that gets uploaded should be one single file with all of those components included in that specific order. Please ensure that the PDF you upload is the adopted LCAP and that it is complete. And just in case you need a refresher on the ELCAP system, Rachel will do just that in the upcoming slides. Rachel?
Thank you, Anita, and hello, everyone. So as Anita mentioned on the previous slide, all LEAs in LA County will be submitting their adopted LCAP through the ELCAP system. And so here we just wanted to provide a quick reminder of how to upload and submit your LCAP for non-ELCAP users. So this would be the process for those LEAs that use some other system to develop their LCAP, such as doc tracking. And so the first step would be to log into the ELCAP system, Or if you don't already have an account, then you would need to register as a new user at elcap.laco.edu. And so once you're logged into the system, the next step would be to click on Manage Plans, which is located on the left menu bar under LCAP. And then on the next screen, you will select the orange button that says Add New Plan, and you can see this in step 3. And so we've also included a link to these instructions, which you can see at the bottom of this slide. And so once you add a new plan, this title page that you see in step 4 will pop up. And so you'll need to complete the required fields on this page. And so this includes the plan title and year, the date of adoption, the LEA type and name, as well as the LEA contact information. And so for the plan year, be sure to select 2026-27. Then at the bottom of the title page, you can see where you will upload the PDF file of your complete LCAP. And so remember that the system, it will only allow you to upload one file. So be sure that all of the LCAP components are included in the order that was previously mentioned. Now at the bottom of the title page, you will need to click on the box that says, do you want to use the PDF plan upload? And so this will allow you to choose your file to upload. Once you've selected your file, then you'll need to click on the green cloud button to upload the file. And so once that upload process has completed, the file name will replace the Choose File button. And then you will need to click the Save button. So be sure to click that Save button. And then the final step, which you can see in step 6, it's to officially submit the plan. So you would need to go back to the plan index in order to do this. And so in the plan index, you'll see an orange Submit button at the top of the screen. And so you'll click on this button to officially submit the plan to LACO. Now for those LEAs that use the ELCAP system to develop their LCAP, when the plan has been completed and adopted by the local governing board, you'll officially submit the plan to LACO by just clicking on that orange Submit button at the top of the screen in the plan index as shown on this slide. And so as a reminder, for all school districts, once the plan is submitted, the status in ELCAP will change from draft to submitted. And then your superintendent will receive an email request to authorize the submission of the plan. And once the superintendent authorizes the submission, the status will change to authorized. And then the formal review process will begin. Now remember, just a reminder for pre-reviews, do not submit the plan in the ELCAP system. So instead, you'll email the PDF of your draft plan to your assigned LCAP coordinator. And then you can download a PDF, remember, by clicking on the download PDF button that's located in the plan index. So here we see the approval process timeline for school districts. And so remember that Education Code 52070, it provides the requirements and the timeline for the LCAP approval process for school districts. Now again, the LCAP must be adopted by the local governing board by July 1st, and then submitted to the County Office of Education within 5 days of adoption. And so remember the review and approval process, it will begin for school districts once the board adopted LCAP is submitted to LACO and after the submission is authorized by your superintendent. Now, between the time that the LCAP is officially submitted and through the beginning of August, school district LCAPs are thoroughly reviewed. And so if necessary, on or before August 15th, the County Office of Education will request in writing clarification of the contents of the school district's LCAP. And within 15 days of receipt of this clarification letter, the district shall respond in writing to the county office regarding these requests. Now, within 15 days of receiving the response from the district, the County Office of Education may provide recommendations in writing for amendments to the LCAP. And so then the district must then consider the recommendations in a public meeting within 15 days of receiving them from the county office. If a school district's LCAP and budget are approved by the County Office of Education by the end of August or early September, an approval letter will be sent to the governing board of the school district on or before September 15th. And so it's important to note that the district's budget cannot be approved until the LCAP is approved. And remember, the deadline for the county office to approve a school district's LCAP is October 8th. Now, when reviewing the LCAP, there are 4 criteria that must be met for approval. And so the first is that the LEA has adhered to the State Board of Education adopted template and has followed all instructions for completing the template. The second criteria is that the LEA budget for the upcoming fiscal year includes expenditures that are sufficient to implement the actions in the adopted LCAP. The third criteria is that the LEA has demonstrated how it is meeting its requirement to increase or improve services for students who are low-income English learners or foster youth. And then the final criteria is that the LEA has made the required calculations to determine whether there is a carryover requirement in supplemental and concentration grant funds for unduplicated students, and also describes the planned uses in the LCAP. Now, as another reminder, all LEAs must post their board-adopted LCAP on their website. And so for both school districts and charter schools, the LCAP must be posted as one single document with all of the required components and in the order shown on slide 37. And so for school districts, remember that it's the LCAP that has been adopted by the governing board and also approved by the county office that must be posted. Another important thing to remember is that all revisions to the LCAP must be posted. So that means all of your LCAPs since 2014 should be posted on your website. And lastly, remember that school districts are also required to post the LCAPs of any charter school that they authorized on their district website. So next, we just wanted to provide a few dashboard reminders. So the reporting window for local indicators will be open from June 1st, 2026 through July 31st, 2026. And so remember, your local indicators will need to be presented to your local governing board as part of a non-consent item at the same meeting in which your LCAP is adopted on or before July 1st. And so when you report your local indicators to the dashboard, you will be asked to report this date. The next reminder is that the CDE will reset the 2025-26 Dashboard Coordinator database on Friday, August 14th at 5 p.m. And so LEAs will be required to submit a new Dashboard Coordinator registration form for the 2026-27 school year beginning on August 17th. And so keep in mind that a new Dashboard Coordinator registration form, it must be submitted and approved by the LEA superintendent or charter school administrator for the 26-27 school year, even if your dashboard coordinator is not changing. And so that concludes the LCAP reminders. And in this next section, we just have a few reminders regarding some upcoming deadlines to keep on your radar. So the CONAP spring released, as mentioned earlier, the submission window is currently open and the initial certification deadline is June 30th, 2026. Now, there are also a number of state programs with expenditure deadlines coming up. And so this includes the A through G Completion Improvement Grant Program, the Arts, Music, and Instructional Materials Discretionary Block Grant Funds, and the Educator Effectiveness Funds. So all funds for these programs must be expended by June 30th, 2026. Additionally, a final expenditure report will also be due for these programs soon after the expenditure deadline, and the specific dates are listed on this slide. Now, for Proposition 28, Arts and Music in Schools, there are a number of deadlines approaching. And so the first is the expenditure deadline for the 2023-24 AMS allocation. And so these funds also have an expenditure deadline of June 30th, 2026. Also, the annual certification, it must be completed on the AMS portal by June 30th. And the board-approved annual report must be submitted to the CDE and posted on the LEA's website by September 30th, 2026. Additionally, a final expenditure report for the 2023-24 AMS funds must be submitted to the CDE by September 30th, 2026. And we've also included the upcoming deadlines that we just reviewed in the previous section related to the LCAP and the local indicators. Now, finally, we've included the upcoming deadlines for the CalPADS end of year 1 and 2 submissions. So remember, there are only 2 end of year submissions this year, which is a change from previous years. The end of year 1 certification deadline is July 17th, 2026, and the amendment window deadline is July 31st, 2026. Now, for the end of year 2 submission, the final certification deadline is August 17th, 2026. And remember, this is the final deadline for end of year 2, as there is no amendment window. And so that concludes today's meeting. So thank you all for joining us today. And please take a moment to complete the evaluation for today's meeting. We truly appreciate any feedback that you're able to provide. And if you have any additional questions for us, please leave them in the chat and we will respond in our Q&A follow-up document. Thank you again for joining us.